I was a sports management student back in 2012 at Loughborough University. I now work as a director and producer, primarily in the sports sector, and I'm a partner in a production company that works on documentaries that cover sport and social issues. So we've done a few things. We've done 3 for Amazon, all about rugby, women's rugby. We did one on gender equality for Netflix, Game On, and just recently done Abby Ward, who's an England rugby player. We followed her when she had her baby and came back in 3 months. So I started that in the very early days, back in 2012 for the Loughborough Lightning netball team, graduated, and then a few weeks out of university, I was working for a company called CSM, who now got bought by Wasserman, and the director at the time was Lord Seb Coe, our friend here at Loughborough. So it's a great opportunity. I talk about the Loughborough advantage, the opportunities you have here working with elite athletes, sports teams. You're going to graduate and all of a sudden realise how good it was. So make the most of whatever you have here. Try new things. It's funny how at university, you've got this free reign to try lots of different things. And there's no pressure. In the real world, that changes very quickly. So don't be afraid. If you've got a passion, something you want to try, really make the most of it here. We're going to go through these 5 things. We'll start with cameras, basic principles, focus and framing, audio, video editing, and exporting, delivery, upload. So the full package of what you need to do on a media course. And what I'd like to say is, anyone recognise the gentleman with the camera there? The bonus points.
Tarantino.
Oh, fantastic. Do you know what film that was as well?
Hateful Eight.
Oh, my man, look at this. It's A+ all over. So whatever you're using, I think it's in the media world, whatever camera you're using, I mean, iPhones are getting so prevalent these days, but also those big cinema cameras, there's the fundamentals that don't change. We're talking about things like your frame rate, your shutter speed, white balance, all things like that. If you're using a tiny iPhone camera up to a big cinema camera, they're things that you need to get right, and that's what we'll look at heavily today. There are ways and means when you'll kind of be creative and change them up, but there's a real, I like to call it a freelancer standard, having a real solid use of knowing what settings you need to use and feeling confident. And that will apply to whatever film project you're on. And what we're going to do is something, again, I call this is like a news package, what you need to do. It's a very standard interviews, B-roll, and telling a story. And in the real world of media, that's something, if you can shoot that, that's the sort of the green light that you can be a comfortable freelancer. If you can go in, shoot a nice interview, light it, get good sound, shoot some compelling B-roll that supports your story, that's a really green light if you want to work freelance, people to hire you. That's kind of the standard you need to be at. Here we go. Before we begin, what's the most important thing in filmmaking? Have a little talk amongst yourselves. Story. And this is the thing I feel gets vastly, vastly overlooked, particularly, it's difficult in kind of the generation you're in, the social media, famous YouTube creators. I think the ones that are getting really, really high views, I'm not going to name any names, but the ones that are really doing it well focus really heavily on story. Maybe the execution, the cameras don't matter as much. So story is really, really important. Whatever media platform you're on, I think that's the first thing to think about. Can anyone give a good definition of story? The best definition I've heard of story is when you're locked into an outcome and you feel emotion at the end. And that's from a guy called Hayden Hillier-Smith, who said it for Logan Paul, Mr. Beast. That's his definition. So if you think whatever you're watching, whether you're watching sports documentaries, fiction films, it's when a character is trying to achieve a goal. That's a key part of a documentary, having a character that wants something, and you also want to feel emotion at the end. If you don't care what happens, that's again coming back to making the audience feel something. If the audience doesn't care about what's happened to this character, you haven't got a good story. Something like, has anyone seen Last Dance, Netflix, Chicago Bulls? So it's a really obvious one here. There's 2 elements of story that we talked about, being locked into an outcome and caring if they achieve the goal or not. The characters, the team's goal, if you don't know, this was the famous Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. They were put together for they'd won 5 titles in a row and trying to win their 6th, which is amazing in itself. But what cared so much, the reason why it mattered so much, so the general manager said, this is the last time this team's going to play together. I don't care if you win or lose. This is your last chance, your last go. And that all of a sudden puts a lot of stakes and emotion on it as well. Winning a 6th was amazing, but having that added stakes on top really counts. So story is the most important. I'd urge you, when you come to do your projects, to really think about the story as well. Think about what your team, your player, what they want to achieve, and also why it matters as well, why they should care about this particular player. It could be they're facing a big rival, it could be they come back from injury, all things like that. You want to really make your audience care about your subject. And as important as story is, correct technical execution. That's a great word to stumble on there, to ensure you're undistracted from the story you're trying to tell. So it's things getting the basics right, getting the settings right, getting nice, good shots, good exposure, good sound. That's all really important to make sure that the story you're trying to tell comes through. Right. Camera setup and basic principles of filming. Getting video right, and again, that's always my business partner Ben there, with a very expensive camera. Getting it technically correct, following the standard rules. You may choose to break them, but to make sure you know what the standard rules are and how to follow them. Has anyone got any of these apps on their phone? So these are a real mix of ones you can use. The standard camera's great. All these apps will let you dial in the functions that proper cinema cameras will use. It's really good. They kind of vary in price. Filmic Pro is great. It's the most expensive. Pro Take at the bottom there is completely free. So once it's opened, it should let you dial in these settings. And you might, if you've got it in front of you now, you might have a little look and just see as they come up. Frame rate. Have you heard the term, hands up, frame rate? Has anyone heard the term frame rate before? Does anyone know why the reason we choose 25 frames as our default frame rate? There's two major schools of thought. There's PAL, which is one system, and there's NTSC, which is another system. Each country will choose either NTSC, which is 30 frames per second as the base frame rate, or PAL, which is 25 frames as the base rate, and choose that as their TV standard. And the norm in the UK is that we're on PAL, 25 frames per second, so we'll choose that as our standard. And the reason people like myself will choose that, because if we want our work, we're shooting a documentary and we hope it's going to end up on TV, we'll shoot it in 25, so it's the right frame rate for broadcast. There's 24, which is cinema, that's the old films cameras shoot at, as that's what we use in cinema mostly. 25 for UK TV, and then 30 frames for US TV. They're ever so slightly negligible. If you're a bit of a nerd like myself, you can spot it a mile off when they're using the wrong frame rate, but it's good to shoot in 25 as your base frame rate. Then if you want to put in some slow motion, for easy maths, for someone who struggles with maths like myself, you either double it or quadruple it. So if you want half slow-mo, you go up to 50 frames per second, which then if you slow it down to 25 frames is half speed, or you go up to 100 frames per second, slow it down by 4 times, and you get 4 times slow motion. So frame rates, that's really important to get it right. If in doubt, shoot 25 as your base for interviews, anything talking. And if you want some slow motion for some nice, exciting B-roll, go to 50 or 100. That's all right. The really important part of this is shutter speed. So shutter speed, it was essentially in old film cameras, it was how quick the shutter went for each frame. So it was either very quick, or it's quite slow, like that. On the old cameras, that's the noise it makes. And it has an effect of making your footage either very crisp and very sharp, or very slow and very dragged. What we like to choose here, so we go by the 180-degree rule, in that of using 25 frames per second for nice smooth motion, to look nice and natural to the eye, you want to double your frame rate. So if your frame rate is 25, you want your shutter speed at 50th. That then means if you're shooting 50 frames per second slow motion, you want to double that again to 100. And if you're shooting at 100, you want to double that again to 200. And what you'll find as well is that will bring the exposure down as well, so you want to be careful. If you are shooting 100 frames per second slow motion, your shutter speed's up at 200, all of a sudden it's going to be very dark, as it would be if you're shooting 25 with a 50th shutter. Resolution. This is quite exciting. You're all probably too young to remember 720. Remember when HD came in for the first time, and how exciting it was, and how terrible HD looks today compared to 4K and 8K. You've got a choice here to shoot on your phone. None of those are wrong. The resolution choice is really yours. Obviously, you can't, 720 is the lowest. You can't upscale that without losing quality. But 4K, obviously, if you're shooting 4K, you can downscale that to whatever you need, so if you deliver in 1080p. The difficulty decides on, obviously, 4K is more edit intensive, so it's going to take your computer longer to render each frame, which ultimately will make your editing a little bit slower. So you can decide whether you want 1080p for nice quick turnaround. If you've got a computer that really struggles, you might go to 720p. Not many people shoot in 720p today. But if you've got the time, you've got the memory card space, you tend to shoot in UHD there, which is 3840 by 2160. So ISO, it's an old film term. Each old film used to have a certain sensitivity to light. So if you were shooting on a nice bright sunny day, you'd have a nice low ISO film, something like 50, 100, 200. If you're shooting at night, you'd have something a lot higher, like 800, 1600. It basically means you'll find it if you play on ProTake, you've got your ISO there. You always want to have your ISO as low as physically possible. That means the camera's not as sensitive to light. The higher you put your ISO, the more grainy. It's like at night when you take a photo and the photo gets all grainy and dark. You want to keep your ISO as low as possible. The issue is, if you're shooting at night, shooting out on a floodlight pitch, you're going to be underexposed if you shoot on something like 100, 200. So basically, the ISO, the rule is you keep it as low as possible and keeping your image nicely exposed. So as a general rule, start on 100, it still looks dark, knock it up to 200, still looks dark, keep going, 400, 600, 800. Around 3200 is probably the max of your ISO. That's where you're going to probably start to get the most grain and noise. Basically, yeah, as low as you can with your ISO. And then white balance as well. So our eyes will naturally, we're going to this room, this light's a little bit yellow, but our eyes, to us, that white wall is going to look white. Our eyes naturally adjust. A camera doesn't. So if your camera's locked in to, say 5600, we go with 55, 56, as that's the colour of when you're daylight, that's when a white piece of paper will look white to a camera. So say the lighting here, it's probably a little bit more, what do you reckon, about 3000. So white to a camera, if you dial in the white balance of 3000, white's going to look yellow. You can correct that in post, but it's always better to try and get everything right in camera. Post software's so good these days, but honestly, it saves your life so much hassle, you can get it all right in camera. So what we do to make sure a white piece of paper look white in this room, we'd adjust our white balance on the camera from 55 down to whatever the colour of that light is, so probably around 3000. And you can keep knocking it and keep playing with it to make sure. So if you've got like a white wall, hold it up, just keep shuffling your white balance until you get it right. Most have an auto white balance option, which is better than manually dialing it in as well. But just to make sure you're actually, if you're in a yellowish room, a yellowish sports hall, they're notorious for looking yellow. that you're dialing in the correct white balance to make your life a lot easier. Can correct it later if you get it wrong, but it's always good to get it right in camera and save your editor lots of times. And also fun is what you've got, if you start using nice bigger cameras, there's something, has anyone heard of log before? Shooting like S-Log, V-Log? So things like this, that's a Sony A7S III we're on right now, and that can shoot S-Log. And log is basically a format where it takes the picture, but it doesn't bake all the detail in. It's basically a long, long list of code for the computer to read. And that basically, so example, if this screen's probably very bright, and I'm quite dark, it records a nice range of images. So in post, I can decide where I want my exposure to be without losing quality. Things like an iPhone will bake all the cameras in, and you start to pull around the shadows and highlights, you start to lose a lot of detail. A log format will lock that all in, so you can go into the color grading suite and make it look beautiful. Something for bigger cameras, but in the future, people might ask you, are you shooting flat or are you shooting baked in? If you have the chance to shoot flat, that's always good. Quite obvious basic principles of filming. Stability, they call it the 3 points of contact rule. So whatever camera you're using, if you're on your phone, if I've got 1 point of contact on my phone, and I would shake your hands, that's not too stable. 2 points is better. If I have three, if I was using camera and had it up to my eye, 3 points of contact, all of a sudden that's a lot more stable than at arm's length. You can do it lots of different ways. Tripod's got 3 points of contact, which is the perfect one. You can also, if you've got a camera like that, you can put a strap around your neck and push it out against the strap. Keeps it nice and stable. There's nothing worse than shaky footage. You can correct it in post, but again, if you try and shoot it nice and stable, that's always better. Landscape and portrait. A difficult one today, that balance between if you're shooting for YouTube, wanting to shoot landscape, between something like a TikTok where you're wanting to shoot portrait. It's something we struggle with every day, and the only solution really is to try and either shoot on there's something called open gate where a camera shoots in a square format and you can use both, or to shoot landscape and then push into portrait. So just make sure I presume you're delivering for sort of a landscape YouTube video, just making sure you're shooting landscape. You can always change landscape to portrait, but portrait to landscape, AI is not quite there to fill in the gaps just yet. It will be soon, but always good to shoot landscape. And overshooting versus undershooting. This is a really important skill when you get into the media industry. If you're delivering, say, if you've got a 1 minute web package that you need to turn around, you're going to shoot at 9 o'clock, it needs to be ready for midday. You don't want to go and shoot 2 hours, you've got to go and cut through. You then shoot maybe 10 minutes to speed up your editing time. So making sure it's good to have more coverage than you need. The worst thing is to come away and I needed so many more shots to finish this, but just making sure that you're not shooting for the sake of it. It's all very deliberate. And you're just thinking, right, my edit needs to be 1 minute, so maybe I need to shoot 3 minutes of good footage to produce the best minute out of that. So almost that's only kind of a sense you can get when you've done a few edits and got into it. Always better to overshoot, a bit more than you need, but not making sure that you're overshooting and filling up your hard drive and changing your edit time later. Lovely, here we go. So this is probably the most unexciting words in the video production, a corporate film, corporate video. This is a company that we work for. I'll give you a little bit of a break from my voice and get you to look at some of the work that we do.
Today, we're in London, gathered together with procurement leaders, digital experts, business analysts, and B2B investors to basically talk about the future of digital procurement and how together we build it.
Procurement is highly overdue for not just an evolutionary innovation in procurement, but a revolutionary one. One thing that was very clear is that it's time for action and experimentation, and that's always exciting because that means innovation is not far behind.
But now it's all changing. Changing because of Gen AI, changing because of the full application of AI, and then integrating decision intelligence throughout the stack as well.
All large enterprises are actively seeking innovative new solutions that kind of break the mold and allow these businesses to do things differently.
I think it's fantastic to network with like-minded people. This is my first time and I thought it was really, really valuable to connect.
It's really like a safe space to exchange ideas, to discuss controversial topics as well. Great event, like always.
It's awesome seeing the community grow. And I think ProcureTech is at the foundation of innovation. They've really built the community not only here in London, but also San Francisco and across the globe by being able to bring more and more folks together to have meaningful conversations about where the space is and where the space is going to go.
We're going to be able to innovate together, network together, and together hopefully build better solutions. This will be a bit of a catalyst for something bigger.
You've got two types of footage. You've got A-roll, which is a word that you will never hear in your media career. A-roll, basically, as you said, like you said, is that main interviews. And that, for obviously something like an event like today, that's kind of used for the main storytelling. Why are we here? What's going on? Why is it important? And that's a key thing that I presume you'll shoot in your packages as well, your A-roll, your interview. Two things I said. So we've got Big Boss Lance, who was there. His eye line, if you notice, he was right in the middle, looking straight down the camera. Whereas every other interviewee was slightly off, slightly to the left or right third. And that's something you do quite often. If you're trying to get your subject to look important, to address the audience, you'll get them to look straight down the camera like Lance here. In news and TV, a lot of the time, in documentaries, what they'll do, they get the eye line straight off camera. You wouldn't be looking miles off that way, but it's kind of looking just off, so it's a bit less intense. Not like it's when you have intense eye contact with someone, that can kind of what you can get if you look straight on the camera. So to have an eye line a little bit off just gives the same effect. They are talking to you, makes it a bit more easy with the audience rather than feeling like they're being straight. But if that's a creative choice that you want to have that really impact, that's great as well. We've then got a word that you will hear all the time, B-roll. B-roll are cutaways, any other shot that isn't your A-roll or your interviews. And that was a great spot there again, that a lot of that was deliberately meant to be storytelling. We started the room filling up. And if you noticed, when there were certain people that were being interviewed, it's always nice to have B-roll of them as well. So on a day like that, I'll go around and try and think, right, who are we interviewing? I'll try and get lots and lots of B-roll shots of those people. So when they're talking, you can overlay them with B-roll. And that's really important for you when you come to your interview. If you're shooting your interviews first when you do your packages, that's really helps to have a mental note of, right, the coach talked about the socks, the shin pads, the boots. You don't think, right, I need to get lots of shots of the socks, the shin pads, the boots, then use my edit, which is really important as well. So it's always helpful to do your A-roll, your interviews first, and know what B-roll you need to get afterwards. And again, a bit more storytelling. So I think there's wides, mediums, and close. There's probably about sort of 12. There's a long list of shot types that you can get. Those are the very basic ones. Wide shots are great, as you say. You can see where you are. You can see the whole room. So if you're trying to tell the audience, we're in this location. This is what's going on in the wide scene. Mediums, you can kind of punch in, so you can still see there's a main focus of each of those shots there. But you kind of tell the environment they're in. And then there are certain close-ups in aspects of this. You've seen this all in feature films, all this kind of stuff. If the director wants you to bring their attention right to what's going on the phone, he'll do a close-up. If he wants to get your a detail like that, close-up shot's really good. So maybe coming back to our socks and shin pads example, if the coach is talking about the whole team's got new boots, they're made by Nike, and they've got this really great stud at the back, you can have a wide of the whole team wearing the boots, a medium shot of a few of the players wearing the boots, and the close-up of the studs at the back, that kind of thing as well. So thinking about what you would bring your audience attention to. If you were talking about the studs at the back and you had a wide shot all the time, you wouldn't quite get the detail across. Lovely. Focus and framing, probably the most unexciting but important part of it all. If you double tap and hold on the phone particularly, it's going to lock on your subject as well. So all of a sudden, a really noticeable thing is, autofocus, when it's kind of jumping in and out of focus, things like that. It's always good to set your focus. Things like on a camera like that today, I've set my focus at a manual point here, so it's not jumping. It's always good to have a nice locked focus. It's always really good if you're monitoring it as well. So rule of thirds, I've jumped on the right one there. The rule of thirds, it's a third grid across the screen, and there's no right or wrong. These are just kind of good practice things to do. So if I've got an interview here, ideally you want the centre of the face to be in that line or that line where it intersects, if that makes sense. We'll come into it a little bit later. If we've got Rosamund Pike here, if she's on the right side, you want the eyes looking that way into the looking space. If she's on that side, the eyes will be looking that way. And we've got centre framing, which has become really, really popular. The most simple, whack them in the middle, get a nice bit of symmetry in the background. So if you're thinking about framing up your shots and making them look the most exciting, these are kind of two very easy things to think about. This is where it gets exciting. Eye line for interviews. The eye line of an interview is crucial. That's brilliant. So say I've got my camera here, got a good example. I'm going to put my interviewee subject here. Now it's really important. If you're doing centre framing and they're talking straight to the camera, that's easy. They can just look straight down. If I'm, as an interviewer, you want to get the eye line, I want to be, as an interviewer, as close to the camera as I can be. Talking to me, it's almost like they're straight down the camera, but not quite as intense as they were. We then draw that 180-degree line. Was that all right so far? Do you want me to go back over that? Just make sure the interviewer, as close as you can to the camera, and make sure they're looking into the wider side of the space. So she's looking there onto the left, it's got more dead space, called dead space, where nothing is. It's gone to a bit of football. So we've kind of got the basics covered. You can shoot your interviews, your B-roll, the story. I think it's a sports match. We're against Lewis Football Club. Have you heard of those before? They used to be WSL2. They just got relegated very sadly this season, still haven't got over it. But they were the first club to pay their men and women equally. Players, they're all like gender equality. And this was the final match a couple of seasons ago against Liverpool.
A small club like us shouldn't be playing Liverpool and Reading and all the clubs that we do play. And the only answer to it really is sexism. Anytime they want, those big teams could put their hand in their pocket and put loads of resources into their women's team and win everything, right? But the fact that they're not is why Lewis is allowed to compete at the level we are at the moment. I think we've got a window of opportunity where we can get into the Super League and stay there until those other teams kind of wake up to the potential of women's football, economically and socially.
There could be nothing more proud than to say your team is in the top league in the country, but I also think that the Women's Super League, if not this year, in the coming 3 years will be the top league in the world. And if Lewis FC, this tiny little club in a tiny little community who's been striving to get partners and sponsors to buy into the bigger vision, it's not about what happens on the pitch this year, it's about the mission and the transformation we can make in the world in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Sometimes I do get scared that everything could fall apart if the pace of change is such that you will have to be attached to a Premier League club in order to compete in the future. We don't have the luxury of time. I feel like Premier League clubs can put in a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan and invest. We know that we might drown, and that's why we have to act now. We have to be doing everything we possibly can.
We're really trying to just be more consistent with our performances, and I think first year being professional, that's only probably natural.
To get a result against Liverpool would be great, because it would also prove to a lot of people who doubt Lewis that we are, a club to be reckoned with.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the FA Women's Championship League winners.
So B-roll in a sports space as well, that looking space we talked about. These shots are from the wider documentary. If a player's going across the screen, it's normal to kind of have them running into what's called looking space, or running into space. And for a shot like this where we're tracking Freya, as she moves across, we're going to kind of keep lots of negative space there so we can see where she's running into. All of a sudden, if your shot's framed like that, it's quite creative, but it's a bit unusual. So just giving them space to run into. And again, storytelling, so even in that, it's quite similar to the video you just saw. Got the game, it's telling you who's playing, what the teams are, we see them warming up, and at the end of game, things like that, shaking hands, interacting with the fans, all things like that to make it edits. It can be quite, there's a sports game, you can get lots and lots of footage, but trying to break it down to think, right, these are the moments I want to capture, I want a couple of warm-up shots, I want a handshake at the end, I want a kick-off shot, all that kind of stuff. You can get very, the film Pulp Fiction, is that really old for you now? I've never heard of Tarantino's, where it's very called non-linear storytelling, where he mixes, it's a day that happens and tells it all in a reverse order. So you can do linear storytelling is kind of the basic one. So you're trying to do, right, they turn up at this time, fans come in, they warm up, all that kind of stuff. So that's the bit. You can get really complicated and mix that all up, but it's always good for a video like yours as well, just to think the story you're telling, take it through the story of the day, they call it. Audio, fantastic. Has everyone got their notes? Everyone ready to take notes? Everyone got a fresh page? Audio is the most important. I couldn't make it any bigger on this slide. The most important thing. I'm going to give you time to write that down and burn it into your brains for the rest of your life. It's more important than your image. If you're watching a video, if it's terrible quality, but it's speaking really nicely, you can hear the sound really well, you'll stick with it. If you're watching the nicest high-end cinema camera, IMAX 65mm, but the mic's all scratchy and terrible, you'll turn off YouTube and go watch something else. So making sure you have nice audio is the most important thing you can do. It's a little bit difficult, it does take time, and there's also a tendency to think, right, I need to get my shot perfect, exposed really nicely, and then just chuck a mic on them and forget about it. But taking that time to think, right, what's my audio situation, making sure I'm getting nice, crisp, clear audio. And good audio basically means making sure the sound that you want to capture, you're capturing without any background noise, things like that. So if I take this example here, does anyone recognise those people in the photo? The handsome gentleman? No rugby fans? I thought it was at Loughborough. I come to the wrong university. Hugo Monnier, former question of sport, before it got cancelled. And then to answer this from Game On. So if you look there, if you look at the top, so we've got you might see in documentaries, the boom, so we're booming them in. Those are called shotgun mics. That's a great example there. We've got 2 mics up there, and also Hugo and Sue are mic'd up as well. So I've got on me here, a lavalier mic. They've each got one of these hidden. And what these do, these lavalier mics are great. They pick up just there, and they get the sound of me talking really clearly. So to get good audio, I could have put a mic on the camera, but for something like this, I'm walking around, I'm talking, this mic is always on me. And very sadly, if the audience is hearing me nice and clearly and hearing me ramble on. So Sue and Hugo are both mic'd up. Then we've also got a nice shotgun mic at the top which captures the sound of an environment. So a shotgun mic, so pickup, they're called pickup patterns. Different mics have different pickup patterns. A mic like this, it'll be getting the audio in this space. It won't kind of hear your fingers typing. Whereas a shotgun mic has a much wider pickup pattern. So if I wanted to capture, say, a team talk, I'd put a shotgun mic in the middle of the huddle and we'd hear it nice and clear. So choosing the right mic is also really important. Does anyone know, it's hard to see in this black and white photo, that kind of scruffy grey sock? There's a backup mic there as well. Does anyone know what that's called? It's got the best name in the film industry. A little one like that, the grey fluffy windsock is called a dead cat. When it's a bit bigger, it's called a dead wombat, which I think is probably the best part of my job. Other than that, does anyone know why we have it, other than to say the word dead wombat and dead cat? So if you see anything like that, they're used outdoors and they stop wind noise. So you might get a wind, if I blow into this mic, that's going to be totally unusable, but that's going to ruin the sound of the mic. So that's wind blowing across the mic, you're not going to hear it. If you put a dead cat, you can get little dead cats for lav mics, things like that. That's going to cut out all the wind noise and make your sound usable. What do you think what the reason is that on that scene where they're all closely together talking, that we've got 4 mics on it? I'll tell you the first reason is in case we forget to press record on one of them, we've got 4 backup options. Probably the main reason. We can then also choose, obviously if you're on your talent, it's great. So say example, if Sue's mic was working, Hugo's died halfway through, we'd probably be able to hear them both all right because Hugo's talking straight into Sue's mic, which is, so on things like that, on documentaries you tend to hide it. So rather than having it out like this where you can see it, that's fine for corporate videos. There's normally on documentaries, you get a little piece of sticky tape and you hide it just under their shirt, and that's really good to get the nice rich sound coming off their chest. So my voice is quite trebly and quite nasally, but my chest is really boomy. Makes me sound more manly. That's good to mic there. We've got a nice clean audio source on both of them, and it also means that we can come into post. We've got 4 microphones. We're recording onto 4 different channels. We can choose which one sounds best. So it'll always be regardless, and it's maybe 50-50 shotgun to lav, which one sounds best. But rather than just putting 1 mic on Sue and calling it a day, we've then got 4. So if one of them dies, or one that's really scratchy, we've got backups, and also that we've got options to choose from as well, get the nicest sounding one. So all right, and I appreciate it. And at this level, you might not be able to have access to all that many mics, but that's the theory of it, trying to have a backup. Things like we'll shoot multi-cameras, we'll try and shoot 3 cameras, A for options, but also for safety as well. So if you have got 2 of you with 2 iPhones, there's nothing wrong with shooting 2 angles, and all of a sudden if someone forgets to press record, you've got a usable shot there, which is always good to have. Basic principles, get as close to your subject as possible. Ideally with a shotgun mic or a boom like that, you want to be about hand's width ahead of them. So we've seen a lot of documentaries behind the scenes, the mic is right there, often pointing at their chest rather than their mouth, because that gets the better sound. But as close as you can, and if you've got a lav mic on them, it's on their chest, that's really as close as you can get. Outdoors, you want to have something to combat your wind noise, something like a dead cat. Monitoring your audio, that's really important. If you're able to, while you're recording, have some headphones in and listen to your audio, that's always really good. You don't want to get home and find out, oh, my mic was rubbing the whole time and I can't use that audio. So that's really important. And if you can't do that, record, say, a 2-minute interview, just have a listen back to your phone, just make sure, oh yeah, the audio's good, that's fine. And if you do it in the moment, rather than forget it, rather than getting home and realising you've done it, you can always, it's easy to record again rather than getting everyone back another day later and doing that. So check your audio's all good. If you're interviewing someone, leaving a bit of space, it's the hardest skill as an interviewer to, if I'm having a conversation with someone's interviewer, rather than say, yeah, that sounds good, or that kind of stuff, you want to communicate non-verbally as possible, so it's nods, smiles, and just leaving a bit of space so that when they finish their interview answer, I just pause for asking my next question. That edit space is really, really useful, rather than having their talk and I talk over them. That ruins the end of their audio. It's just making sure as an interviewer, you're not injecting your voice onto the situation. And yeah, does anyone know what Hugo has in his hands? Does anyone know the name for that? So it's a clapperboard as well. So if you're doing your interview subject, if you're recording, say, you're recording on one iPhone, your friend's getting sound on another iPhone, get the subject, say, give me a quick clap. So you can see the clap on screen, you can hear it nice and loud on the phone, and that makes things syncing up lots and lots easier. You can, when you get professional, these have got, it says a little box on top of this camera. These run off what's called time code. It basically means that all time, this audio recorder and that time code box is telling the camera exactly what hour, what minute, what second, and what frame it is. So when I get into post, I can just throw this into our software, it syncs it up without having any sync claps. So all of a sudden, if you're recording 3 cameras on a documentary across the whole day, rather than having to sync up every individual time someone presses record, it does this by time code, it makes life a lot easier. But the basic principle of a sync clap is that you're telling the camera and the sound, this is the right time, you can work out what it is. See the noise, that's a very important point. As you kind of say, if you're trying to take out the background noise, it's a good example. So basically, let's imagine, you're a sports stadium, you're all in the fans, I'm here doing my interview, you're all cheering, lots of now, I'm trying to do my post-match interview. I've got 2 choices. I can either put my subject here and film that way, or I can put it here, look back at the pitch and film that way. What's the right option if you're all background noise, I can't move, I can't get out of the stadium, I can't get rid of it, Shall I film looking at you or looking the other way? Perfect. Back yourself, you had it right. So seeing the noise. So basically, if say I'm doing an interview, if all I can see is this white wall, the person talking, and there's crowd roar behind, it's really unnatural, really unnerving. The whole time your mind's thinking, where's this crowd noise coming from? It doesn't make sense, I don't get it. All of a sudden, if your brain can see that crowd noise, we have an amazing tendency to filter it completely out. So if I'm in the background, I can see the crowd's going wild, I've got my person talking, they're mic'd up so they're okay, but you can hear the crowd noise in the background. Your mind's got a brilliant tendency to filter that all out. So that's really important. So if you are doing it, if you can't get rid of the background noise, just make sure you can see it in your shot. It's important. It's amazing what your brain will do to get rid of it. Ideally, say if you're on a sports pitch, ideally you want to go the other end and get as far away from it as you can. But just make sure if you can hear it really loudly in your shot, if you can hear it, make sure you can see it as well. That'll really help. So for example, here we've got Maro here, talking crowd. So all of a sudden, those players are going to be really loud. That camera shot, you can see all the players behind them to make sure the noise makes sense. Audio equipment options. Depends how much you want to spend. I think these are all under £10. I'm not going to spend your hard-earned student money. I remember those days living off a student budget. Things like the camera mics, the on-built mics aren't great. So if you're in a noisy environment and you're filming on an iPhone and you're far away, if you're saying my subject's here and I'm that close, it might be all right. You kind of want to be as close as you can as possible. If you've got a friend that can lend their iPhone, they can sit in their pocket or they can even talk into it and do a sync clap, that's even better. So it's nice close to the mouth. And definitely a sync clap if you're using two sources of audio. Things like cheap wireless mics, if you wanted to get one for future use for if you're making content as well. I think that's about £10, that one. And these little, if you're outside, there's little fluffy dead cats. You can just pop on a lav mic like that as well, if it's windy. I talked about this a lot last year and stuff. I'm sure you've seen all the YouTube videos. There's those square little Rode mics that everyone has on YouTube these days. They all talk into them. That would be sacrilege back in my day. You'd be laughed out the building for that. But I think you're in a very exciting time where the old school, the grandpas like myself, those rules are being dissolved now, and you can kind of have this new YouTube space. So something like this. So don't be afraid. On documentaries, we'll hide mics and we'll still go that traditional route. But don't be afraid if you're all of a sudden have a phone and talking into it, and you get great audio. I'd do that over having the phone not there and not doing it. That makes sense. So I think that's all a very exciting time of media. And also, clipping before. Clipping too hot. It basically means when your volume's a bit too loud. So looking at that, you'll find the audio meter, when it's bumping up into the red, clipping, it starts to distort and you start to lose quality. So just making sure where's my phone? If I'm talking right here, that's probably going to be a bit too loud. To give it a bit of space, just make sure you're monitoring as well that it's not overpowering and not losing all the quality. Interview techniques, talk for days about this. Did anyone watch my favourite show, Hot Wings? No, it's not Hot Wings, Hot Ones. First to be feast, Sean Evans. This Spicy Chicken Wings. Sean Evans is the most incredible interview, and you've seen how he comes away with the most ridiculous facts, things like John Boyega, and he blows his mind with facts like that. So to go away and think about your questions, and just to show I care about you so much that I've researched this, I've listened to, so if I do interviews like this was when we did Tanni Grey-Thompson, you go away, you listen to all the podcasts with her, you read all these things, and you think, obviously, you swat yourself up, so you're not asking, like, who are you, what have you achieved, all that kind of stuff. That'd be ridiculous for someone like Tanni Grey-Thompson. But to think what the questions she's been asked, what does she care about, what does she want to talk about, and also what hasn't she been asked. That's what Sean Evans is really, really good at, of thinking. I think he talks about Star Wars and anime for John Boyega, and he puts them together in a question, and John Boyega's mind is just blown that someone's thought so much about this. So come prepared, show that you care, and it makes your interview more interesting as well. We work with a lot of amazing, famous people, and they're going to get asked the same questions, all that kind of stuff, and think day-to-day, if you're asked the same question every day, the same interview, you've got your standard answer, which is really boring. And there's a lot of things, football post-match interviews, they're all just the same thing. The game went well, we're going to get ready for next week, all that kind of stuff. You want to try, with your subjects, is what we try and do really well in authentic documentaries, is to get people to open up and give those responses. They're the ones that are going to blow up on social media when they're actually themselves and they're excited, rather than the standard media train answers. So if you can, again, this is big picture for your future career, but just thinking of trying to be a bit more exciting in your interview questions. Short, open questions, always really good. So ask someone like, did you win today? Did you enjoy that game? You can answer them with yes, no, quite simply. Thinking of what questions, how was the game for you today? When did you feel like that game was going to go your way and you were going to win? What was the best part of the game today? All things like that, things that are going to get longer responses, and just open them. Again, not talking over each other. We'll go on to that, and showing you're engaged. So if you find it hard to interview someone, I look exactly at this spot here. So what I'm doing, every time I look at you, I'm looking exactly at there to keep eye contact, because it can get really, if I was looking at someone eye contact, I feel like I'm going to look at you now with eye contact, but it can get really uncomfortable with, see, this is the one, I don't blame you, not the first person to look away from me. Looking at eye contact like gets really uncomfortable, so I kind of look there, maybe for 7 seconds, I look down at their hand, I look back up. repeat, 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 things like that. You can also, it's interesting, when Michael Kenner's thing, he plays off one eye. So I've been doing lately, when I'm talking to someone, I look at just one eye. It's quite interesting, and that's less intimidating than looking at someone in two eyes as well. Is a good one to do for. Because you can't, if you're talking to someone as an interview, you can't just look away and be really shy. You've got to be engaged. Things like the triple nod as well. That's a really good one. That keeps people going. If I want someone to keep talking, I just keep doing that. Maybe give them one of that if they're interested, and then back to the triple nod. Look at their hand, back between the eye, one eye, all that kind of stuff. So you find it interesting, and your subject is going to keep going and keep talking. So that's really good. So that's a really important one to think about. You find it hard to talk to people, and that's the kind of way of not speaking. I tend to, if someone's pouring their heart out to you, and you're just straight-faced, you've got to kind of be like, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of without shouting it over at the thing. So it's good fun. As a filmmaking theory, it's all about, you tend to, there's something called a Harmon Circle. It basically goes around, you start with a character, they're in a comfort zone, they try a challenge, they fail, eventually they get there, they meet the dragon, they either beat the dragon or get beaten up, and then you finish with the final image, and that's what happens to them afterwards. So all of a sudden, so Lewis might very sadly lose. It's then, right, what have they learned from this experience? Have they banded together as a team? Are they going to be better next season? So it's all looking at, and you'll find that quite, especially in sports docs, it is quite hard if you're banking them on the wall winning. I'm sure there's sports documentaries where, anyone seen some really old films, Coach Carter? Anyone seen? Oh, thank goodness I'm not ancient just yet. But he's teaching, even think, Last Chance U, the basketball documentary series. Everyone's seen, oh lovely. I swear every Last Chance U team seems to lose. I feel really sorry for Greg Whiteley. But it's all looking at what have they gained from this experience. People, Coach Carter, they're better gentlemen than when they started. They've got a future now. Last Chance U always finishes with that montage of who's got a scholarship to where, which is really amazing. So it's thinking, although the team's lost, what have they gained from this situation? I'd say, how have they, in a film, maybe how have they changed as characters? Maybe your protagonist was Ted Lasso. Any fans? Oh, thank goodness. Please go and watch Ted Lasso. It's phenomenal. It's the best piece of storytelling, visual storytelling. I could talk about it for days. Player called Jamie Tart, who starts as a very selfish, spoiled, classic footballer. At the end, he comes around. I think it's the end of the first season when he gets back, and he's this very selfless player who passes to score the winning goal rather than actually taking it himself and stuff. So kind of what have your players learned from that? If that makes sense. Editing. I'm going to whiz through editing. Who's confident with editing? In CapCut stuff? Nice. Oh, yes, this is the most exciting slide. This is my favourite one. Backing up and storage. So it is unbelievably important to back up your footage correctly. If you do amazing days film, you get the best footage in the world, but all of a sudden you leave your memory card on the side, it falls in your coffee, the day's ruined. So as soon as I was taught, I'm going to get really excited and really into this now. This is my favourite thing in the world. Backing up your footage. As soon as you get home, backing up your footage. The professional due diligence is to have 3 copies of your footage in 2 different places, 2 different physical places. So what that means is when I get back to the studio, what I do, I've got 2 hard drives on my desk. I back up a copy of my footage to each one of those. All 4 cameras, all 4 cards that we used, all my audio solutions. I then have a 3rd backup drive that I back it all onto there, and I take that one home with me. So if our studio gets robbed or it all falls down and the hard drives get corrupted, I've still got a saved copy. What I say, 2 is 1 and 1 is none, and then 3 is if you really love backing up like I do. That might be a bit impractical for you to go and buy 3 hard drives, but think about it. If you've got a computer hard drive, that can be as simple as you put it on your computer hard drive, you airdrop the important stuff to your phone, and you airdrop the important stuff to your friend's phone. You get a Dropbox account, you get a Google Drive. Basically just make sure, because obviously Google Drive and Dropbox are all in California somewhere on a big data farm. So all of a sudden, if your laptop breaks, you can get it back from that. So just making sure that you've got copies, that is really, really important. There's nothing worse than shooting the best footage and you can't use it. And don't delete the footage until the project is all delivered. You get things, I get like an unlisted YouTube account, you can load all your, they call it rushes, raw footage. If you want to, you can export all your raw footage to there and put it all in there for safe storage and that'll be in the YouTube servers. I think we've got a petabyte now on Dropbox of stuff that we've used, so we can always go back and do it. So it's really important to keep your storage nice and safe. Free editing software choices, lovely. So if you're on Mac, I should have iMovie inbuilt. So it's a good mix, isn't it? A few Mac, a few Windows. Good. Premiere, Adobe Premiere, there's maybe 4 different editing software choices we use. Hands have heard of Adobe Premiere? So that's kind of the main industry standard one. I tend a lot to use. That's the most flexible across all the programs. Avid, has anyone heard of? Oh, that's dangerous close to hang up. That's like the old school film one. It's getting a bit obsolete, but all the Hollywood, Top Gun, Tom Cruise, all that stuff's cut on Avid. It's very expensive, very slow and very difficult to use. So unless you want to get into Hollywood films, I stick with Premiere. Final Cut Pro, if you're on Mac. It's basically like a pumped up iMovie and getting really, really good. And then this is DaVinci Resolve at the bottom, and that is free for Mac or Windows. It takes a little bit of a while getting used to, but it's amazing what it could do. It was first designed as color grading, so the color grading features are phenomenal. It's way better than Premiere, Final Cut, everything put together, and it's completely free. It's a 5-stage workflow, which is a little bit odd until you get used to it, but it's as powerful as Premiere as well. So if you want to have something free for life, and you can upgrade to the paid version if you want to, but the light version does everything you need professional edit software to do. I won't go through anything in particular, because there's going to be a tutorial for it on YouTube. So choose your editing software, and there'll be an exact tutorial for what you need. These are the basic stages of editing. You have the very exciting backing up and organising your footage. How many times do you back up your footage? Come on, rule of threes. That's another filmmaking one. Rule of threes, everything's 3. Import your footage editing software, cut the narrative. So narrative is our A-roll, that's our interview, that's our storytelling, people talking to camera. You then paint it with B-roll. So tell me right here, paint it with B-roll, and then trim and review. Lovely. Oh, this is my favourite slide. So this is our Lewis documentary. So we're shooting this. This is maybe a season, so 8 months. So this is my master folder here. We start with on every drive, it's exactly stored the same as this. I start with my master footage. You can see what I think is about 20 days. There's 18 days of footage every shoot, coded date for every shoot. So this is number 2 Maggie interview. For the footage, we've got 5 cameras that we shot on, and each camera's going to have 4 memory cards all copied there. And all of a sudden now, if I chuck that all into one folder, and then come July when I've got to cut the film together, I'm not going to be able to find anything at all. So basically keeping it really organised is so important. We also have, anyone heard of proxies? Anyone heard that before? Proxies are low resolution of your footage. So these are red digital cinema cameras. They're shooting 4K RAW, massive files. Proxies are when you put it through something like Media Encoder, and it takes it down to like a 360p file to edit with, so your computer can handle all that. And then when you want to export it, you turn it back to the full resolution, and your computer takes a day to plow through it. Proxies are great. And then this is our basic order. Feel free to take a photo of it, you've got it. That's how we organise all our projects. We have footage in one, audio in another. I have my edit timelines in there. Resources, so like logos, graphics, all that kind of stuff. After Effects, anyone heard of After Effects at all? It's like a graphics kind of editing software. That's my After Effects projects. Exports, that's where I'm going to do like a draft cut of a scene and put it in there. Grade is when we put the footage into DaVinci Resolve and grade it again. I'll tell I'm losing you now. I'm loving this. It's my favourite part of it. I'm losing you. Masters are that one final master when the finish is all done. That's where that lives. And we've got DaVinci audio mixing, just stuff we use to deliver it. So yeah, eventually you might not need to get as into backing up as I am. If you're doing something like that, you've got a master folder for your project, footage, audio, edit, resources, edit exports. That's on that. And you can even do, so if it comes off your iPhone like that, that's your footage from the day. You can label it, right, I've got my interview the coach, establishing, interview the coach audio, stuff like that. There's always a good one. You just want to get into it and start editing, but this is going to make your life so much easier. It's really important. Lovely, and these should play. So this is Adobe Premiere Pro. Does it look familiar? Has anyone's kind of seen non-linear editing like this before? This is kind of a basic one. DaVinci, it'll be quite similar. Final Cut Pro is a little bit different, but essentially works off the same principle. I've got all my footage in that bin there. You've got a window selector here, so preview window. I can choose the in and out point to put in. That's my final playback, and that's my timeline here, which I edit on. So what I'll do to start, I think this one drags on, but basically I'm going through, I've chosen this clip in my interview. I can go through now, I can pick the bit that I want. That's our audio meter on the right. And it's looking all right. If it hits red, you know it's clipped and gone too loud, but that should be okay. I can just drag it onto my timeline, just like that. So that's what I start to do. And that's got 4 tracks to that. So that camera has, it's called Scratch Audio, so it records 4 different tracks of audio. It calls a lav mic, a shotgun mic, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to slip it down there just to 1 track. All right so far? Good to, let's skip the stage. Or add clips timeline. Nice. So what I've done now, I've gone through and put my audio interview together. So I'm picking the best parts of his interview, essentially building up. We've got a video channel, video 1 just there, audio 1 just there. And essentially this is my now. I'm taking the best part of his answers. I'm trimming it down. He might answer a question quite long and I can take the start and the end of it, or just the bits that I want. I've got my interview narrative all coming together. I've got different people in there as well. It's getting exciting. So essentially you can tell your story front to back, and that's the first thing that you do. You might mix in, if you've got a coach and a star player or whatever, you might mix that all in. And your narrative ideally wants to be, rather than just the coach talking about the game and a player talking about the game, trying to keep it all flowing. So maybe the coach will say, the opposition were tough, and then the next player will pick up and say, but you know what, we had the best performance of our day today, that kind of thing, a nice flowing narrative as well. You can really get creative with that. Once you've done that, so I've got my narrative all sorted, that's the first thing. I'm going to go through and choose my B-roll, my cutaway shots. So choose a nice shot like that, and I'm going to drop it on the timeline channel above. So I'm placing it, so that means I can come back later to my interview narrative, and I want to make a change in that. I haven't deleted it or gone over it. I'm going to have a good look through here, find my B-roll, and ideally, again, you're thinking, what's the person said? If he's talking about the London Eye, this shot would be great. If he's talking about Big Ben instead, that shot would be better. Essentially, you're going through, you find the good points. You can adjust stuff on the timeline, but you want to try and get the bulk of it on there and kind of get a rough cut coming together a bit like that. So it says, here in London today for a big event. And trying to find shots that flow together, that tell your story, but also makes it, if you look, you'll find it very obvious. It's good sometimes to watch with the sound off and just watch how the cuts come together. Ideally, I try and a bit like a tennis match. I like a shot that's framed on the left, and a shot that's framed on the right, back and forth like that to keep it engaging. So if you're just cutting the shots on the left, it gets a bit boring. But you're mixing it up left, right, centre, left, that kind of stuff. It makes it more exciting for the viewers to go through. There you go. And once you've got to that, this is kind of what a finished edit starts to look like. You can adjust. You can put some music on. I'm going to put it on channel 4 or 5. Music at the bottom. And that's kind of finished edit. What I tend to do, there's two schools of thought doing. If you're a big Netflix Hollywood studio, you have a crew of people that go through and tag the metadata for each of your footage. So they'll say, like a last chance, they'll say, right, here's John Franklin III, quarterback, good shot, all that kind of stuff. So you can then search, I did a shot of John Franklin throwing a touchdown pass, you can search it. What I like to do, I go through and put all my footage on the timeline. I then color code it. So I go through, if it's say for example, I've gone through and I've taken off the start and the end, anything that's not usable. I then have orange as my B-roll color, so there's one orange audio clip there. Green is kind of good footage. Lavender is my best footage. So I tend to go through and I go back. I can very quickly look at a timeline and see what the best shots are, because ideally they'll be the ones that you'll want to use. But also, if you've got it all your usable, they call it selects on a timeline, you can say, right, I need a shot of a shin pad. You can very quickly scrub through the timeline, find that shin pad shot. And you can do things like, I started to color code things like cerulean yellow for certain things like that. So I know I've got a code that I work with that I know that basically makes my life easier when I want to go and find a shot. I can do it as easy as that. But I'd say probably about 10%, even on the best shooting days, 10% of stuff will make the edit. So I think it's kind of making sure, and you never know as well till you get into it, and you need a certain shot of something. Sometimes the most basic shots need to go in and say support the story. So I'd say whatever works for you is a good system. But if you can, all your footage on the timeline, find the usable bits, and then kind of go in from there. And if you can color code it to find the best bits that you want, anything that helps. And you can even, sometimes I put little text layers on here to say, use this shot at end or whatever, that kind of stuff. So it depends how. It's a little bit less important for you now because obviously Instagram and TikTok and everything can work out the track and sort the royalties that way. If you're delivering for, also Nike come along and say, can you shoot us a new commercial? If you want to use the new Billie Eilish song, unless you've got lots and lots of money, that's very difficult to do. Clearing professional music is very, very hard and very expensive. There's things like Artlist, Envato, Soundstripe, Epidemic Sound, where you can pay either for a one-off royalty-free song, or you can buy, so I have a license for Artlist, which is £200 a year. I can use anything I want on their library, footage, music, templates, plugins, anywhere in the world, which is really, really special. So on a Netflix documentary, I can clear Artlist songs for £200. Lovely. Oh yeah, this was the sound sync we came back to. So that sync lab we talked about, editing software. So you can see how there's a similar pattern here, but they're out of sync. So a computer can do it, Adobe can synchronize them all up massively. You're just trying to find that sync clap at the same point to line it up. Oh, export, delivery, upload. Make sure when you come to your export window in Adobe, in DaVinci, whatever it is, you're doing it at the same resolution that you filmed it in, ideally, unless you're downscaling it. So if you filmed in 1080, make sure you're exporting in 1080. If you filmed in 4K, ideally 4K, but you can download to 1080. Bit rate, haven't heard that term before? It's probably the one thing to take away from this, bit rate. Ideally, so if you're on, based on how much quality it's going to bake into the video. You can export a 4K video at 2 megabytes per second and it's going to look horrible. Ideally, 1080 you want at 32 megabytes per second, 4K at 60, just for the right amount of compression. It's going to compress it on the web to make sure you're delivering at the right range. And then it seems like, has anyone heard of Vimeo before, the website? You can use, obviously, YouTube unlisted. Video professionals tend to use Vimeo. It's just a lot cleaner, a lot easier for the client experience. Vimeo, you do have there's a free version of Vimeo. There's a Plus membership, which is better. So you can use YouTube for now when you're ready to make the jump into freelance. Vimeo's a good one to look at. And if I was going to send a master file to someone, I'd use WeTransfer. That's my way of doing it. But you can use Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever works for you. These are the ones that we found are the easiest and quickest. There you go, and that's your lot.